on today's Story Beat.
The other thing I think would help singers to know is that you can do it any way you want. This is your rendition. This is your expression. You don't have to sing the song. You can sing the song and where it's supposed to go really loud, you can pull it back and whisper it, and people will pee their pants.
This is Story Beat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. Story Beat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on Story Beat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, the brilliant singer-songwriter David Pomerantz, has achieved success in virtually every entertainment medium. His concert performances have delighted audiences worldwide. His recording and songwriting projects have earned him a total of 22 platinum and 18 gold albums, selling over 40 million records worldwide. At 19, Decca Records signed David to a multi-album solo contract. He subsequently toured extensively with artists like The Carpenters, Steely Dan, Air Supply, Randy Newman, Rod Stewart, The Doors, and many more. David's songs have been recorded and performed by a long list of major artists, including Bette Midler, Kenny Loggins, Cliff Richard, Freddie Mercury, Kenny Rogers, Glenn Campbell, Lou Rawls, John Denver, Missy Elliott, and Barry Manilow, who had international #1 hits with David's Trying to Get the Feeling Again and The Old Songs. David's solo albums include It's in Every One of Us, Time to Fly, The Truth of Us, New Blues, On This Day, and The Eyes of Christmas. He's performed sold-out concerts at the Kennedy Center, Hollywood Bowl, London Hippodrome, Universal Amphitheater, and hundreds more. David's written music and lyrics for major motion pictures like Big and King Kong. On TV, his songs have been featured on Will and Grace, the Summer Olympic Games, Boston Legal, American Idol, and Showtime's Elvis Presley's Graceland, for which he composed the score. He's also contributed songs to the hit London musical Time, starring Cliff Richard and Sir Laurence Olivier. For the Charlie Chaplin-based musical Little Tramp, David wrote music, lyrics, and co-wrote the book with Stephen Horwich. He also composed music for the Dickens classic A Tale of Two Cities, with lyrics by Stephen Horwich and book by Stephen Horwich and David Soames. And he composed the Tony-nominated musical Scandalous, with Kathy Lee Gifford and composer David Friedman. Beyond all that, David also hosts Song Sessions with David Pomerantz, a popular podcast in which David talks shop with some of the most iconic songwriters of our time. Guests have included Richard Marx, Melissa Manchester, Barry Mann, Paul Williams, Barry Manilow, Alan Bergman, and more. Song Sessions can be found at davidpomerantz.com and on major apps and platforms everywhere. So for all those reasons and many more, I'm deeply privileged to welcome one of the greatest singer-songwriters of this or any age, David Pomerantz, to Story Beat today. David, welcome to the show.
Well, my gosh. Thank you, Steve. Thank you. That was quite a beautiful introduction. I had the feeling that I was falling out of a window, and it's my last moments on earth. My entire life went by.
Well, I hope for at least the next hour you'll stay with us.
All right, you got it.
So let's go back in time a little bit, back to your roots. You've been performing for quite some time. You started when you were a kid, basically, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I started, maybe it's not so different from you being in the theater and pop worlds too. But when I was 5 years old, I listened to the score to West Side Story on the den floor of my house. And it was at that moment, people sometimes say, when did you decide to blah, blah, blah? 5 years old, West Side Story. I was blown away. Wow. And I, at that point, really realized that this is all I wanted to do in life, is be near that kind of emotion and adventure of music.
You knew that at 5?
I did. I mean, I didn't think about my career or anything. I just knew I wanted to be near it. I wanted to eat it and drink it and and have it in my life, because it was the most real, extraordinary thing that I could have imagined. And you know what? It still is.
So that feeling at 5 has never left you. It's only increased.
It's never left. That's true. It's never left. I try for it, but it's the joy of my life to be around it. You know.
So did you go off and become trained in some way? Did you take lessons? Did you go to school?
I did not take lessons. I kind of was not scared of it, but I was concerned that I'd be influenced, because it was coming up in the time of the singer-songwriter, and James Taylor and Paul McCartney and and Joni Mitchell and these boys and girls. I don't think they're particularly trained in music theory, and I admired that. I thought, wow, there's something kind of reckless and wild and free about just not worrying about the notes on the page. Of course, looking back on it, I realized it was just too hard. So,
well, how did you learn to play the piano? Did you just do it by yourself?
I taught myself. I took about 6 months of piano lessons, and maybe a couple of drum lessons. I played drums as well, and I taught myself guitar, and basically taught myself piano after that.
Well, that's I have never played an instrument. I don't know how to play an instrument. I do everything that I've done with lyrics by ear. So I'm amazed, because I don't understand how that works when you can just sit down and figure out how to play an instrument by yourself. That I think is interesting.
Well, my mother plays the piano, and beautifully, and she would have what we used to call fake books, basically.
Fake books, sure.
And, she had the legal ones, and then she had sheet music and such, and she would play beautifully. But I would look above the lyrics, and I'd see chord symbols, and I went, that I can confront. I can do that. And so I knew where a C chord was, and a D chord, and after a while, where diminished chords would come in, and augmented chords, seventh chords, and I got the feel for the whole thing. But it came from the chord symbols, not reading the notes so much.
Interesting.
And I could fool my parents' guests. They would think that I was just reading, but of course I was just reading the chord symbols and playing.
Are you able to sight read?
Not well.
You have to learn. You have to learn a song.
I have to. Oh yes, I have to learn. I have to learn the song. I do it by ear. But
by ear.
I could, but I don't do it well.
So you always have been a naturally gifted musician. It's not something that you had to really dig deeply to say, hey, I understand this. You got it early on.
I got it early on. And again, in retrospect, and with great respect to those who are well trained, like someone like Randy Newman, for example,
right,
that you mentioned, who's a guy who plays these quirky and sometimes heartfelt pop songs, and then goes ahead and writes a score that will just tear your heart out. Because he's so accomplished as a composer and orchestrator. That's something that I, in retrospect, I would have done again. I would have studied to do that. But yes, I find my own adventure.
I think he's one of the greatest writers of character in song ever.
True, that's right. It's true. I agree with you.
He really digs down and gets character into the songs that's not in every pop song, but they're always in his songs.
Yeah, that's very true.
People, characters. All right, so I'm just curious, do you think of yourself primarily as a writer or a performer, or both?
Definitely both. Gosh, I struggled with that when I first started, because people would ask that question. They'd say, which one are you? And are you a breathman? Are you a Candyman? What are you? And we're still in later years, when I started to write for the theater after writing for pop, then they really put it to me. You got to do one or the other, man, because people don't get it. They don't, what are you? And of course, the answer, which the answer is, I'm a musician. I write music. But in terms of singing and performing was a little like that. But again, I came up in a time where singer performers was the thing.
So when you are writing,
yeah,
are you thinking about the audience you're going to play this for, or the audience that you're trying to sell it to? Do you think about that audience, or are you only thinking about your own feeling about the work?
What a good question. Well, in pop music, my better songs have been personal experience. I have gotten assignments, like when I wrote "Trying to Get the Feeling Again," it was actually for the Carpenters, and
they covered it, correct?
They covered it, but when Manilow put his single out, they took it back, and later it was released posthumously when Karen died. But so that was an example of being given an assignment, and I would go and write a Carpenter's song, but of course you can't do that because it has to be real and feel like something and feel real. So I tapped my own experience and wrote that song, but it was for them, and again, it's an assignment. So it's not always, oh my God, inspiration, jump out of bed, I got it. Sometimes it is, by the way.
Well, clearly, lots of artists, we've already mentioned quite a few of them, have, including major superstars like Barry Manilow, like the Carpenters, they've performed and recorded your work. What would you say is the best part of hearing your work that, you sat at a piano and you worked it out, now somebody's put it out on a record? What is the best part of hearing that for you?
I love it when they take it further. And
they plus it.
Yes, they plus it. There's several artists that copy my demo, which is fine, and do a good job of it. But there was one case where, Cliff Richard?
Oh, sure.
I don't know if a lot of your listeners may.
He's British, so he didn't translate over to America hugely, but he's a big British star.
That's true. He had a few hits here, but he's iconic in the UK.
Right.
And he recorded a song I wrote with Dean Pitchford.
Yes.
Great Dean. Called "I Still Believe in You," and when we heard the record, it starts the way I started, and has a beautiful orchestral thing that I didn't have on my demo. But after the verse and the chorus, they decided to take the melody, which I really liked and was proud of, and make something of it. And they took, I don't know, it might have been 45 seconds of the record, and instrumentized, if that's a word, it is now, instrumentalized my melody, my lovely melody, into something that was so grand that I was sobbing. I was just crying. I couldn't believe how beautiful it was. And that it was my melody was just, it was indescribable. So that's an example of when it can go plus, like you say.
Because when you, as all songwriters do, you're going to not write in an orchestra. You're going to write on a single instrument, whether it's a piano, guitar, or whatever. And when you're playing on the piano, you're sort of getting all of the feeling of the orchestra, or however you're going to orchestrate it, but it isn't the orchestra. And then when you finally hear that thing, it's like, holy mackerel, it's much bigger than you probably had in your head.
Sure. Well, it's especially true of writing for theater, which
especially true for writing for theater.
There's that feeling where no matter how fleshed out that demo is, when the orchestra, when you sit at the Sitzprobe, or which is the rehearsal for the orchestra, it's the first time composer and lyricist hear the orchestra playing your song. That can be very chilling.
It's chilling. You get chills up and down your spine, like, "Ooh, this is better than you ever imagined," at least for me.
Yeah.
So
kind of the reason you do it.
Of course. Yeah. I'm going to ask you a question I ask most of my guests, and I find every answer fascinating. For you, what makes a good song good?
Wow. Oftentimes it's a simplicity, and I guess Sondheim talks about it and such in his books, but and when you've heard it, it's almost a cliche. It's hard to write simple. It's hard to write "God Bless America" or "Yankee Doodle Dandy" or something. It's like, yeah. So how do you do that when something is simple and right? Then and it's undeniable. Oh, let's say a good example would be. It's the Lauren Daigle song, the recent, you say, you said, you say I'm weak, you say I'm strong when I say I'm weak. It's so simple, and it is just perfect, because all the spaces are there. Well, on the other hand, when you listen to I don't know, the overture to Candide or something, which is so remarkably
Complex.
It is so well shaped. It's hard to describe. I'm fumfering around to say why.
Well, it's a difficult question, which is why I ask it.
No, it's a great question, but I'll say just one last thing about it, using Candide as an example. That piece of music is so great in its construction that knocks me out, just like Silent Night knocks me out, for a completely different reason. One is simple. Silent Night is my favorite song, by the way.
Is that right?
It is. And but when you get something adventurous and accomplished like Candide, that's another grand moment.
I happen to think that it would be very challenging for a pop composer, though not impossible, to write something like Candide. It almost requires a Leonard Bernstein who has such a massive orchestral background to actually get there.
Yeah, but now we have Pro Tools and Logic.
That's true.
And you can, I find myself experimenting all the time.
And synthesizers.
Yeah, it's just a keyboard, and make 2/4 bar, 3/4 bar, 6/4 bar, back to the 2/4, and back, and mess it up.
So let's explore songwriting then a little bit. When you get an idea for a new song, you have some kind of melodic concept in your head, I assume, or does it come to you by virtue of just sitting down at the piano and noodling notes?
It's usually I noodle chords. Chords are my favorite thing. Harmony chords is my favorite thing.
And all right, so then that's where you start. You don't start with lyrics first, or do you come up with a hook first?
It's usually I'm sitting at the piano and I find something melodic that excites me. I go, or I never heard that before. Or sometimes, and I'm sure you relate to this, sometimes it's something that I have heard before. Not that I've copied something, but it's kind of mundane a little bit. And I take one note and I just cheat it down. One, boom. And all of a sudden it is a brand new melody. It's fascinating. So I mess with it until I find something where I go, ooh, and then generally I'll write lyrics to it. But there's usually a title that comes out of my gibberish lyrics. I know McCartney talks about that too, but it's also for me like trying to get the feeling again, since you mentioned it. Was trying to get the feeling again, the one that make it in your bananas when you're but I had trying to get the feeling again because it kind of fit there.
Well, we know yesterday started as scrambled eggs.
That's right.
So do you then have a regular routine that you go through to develop that piece of music into a song? Is it just sitting there and sort of, I'll use the term loosely, brute force? You're just working the keys to try and find it? Or do you sit back and try to think your way through it? I'm just curious your process on that.
Gosh, I never looked at that, but I think it's all of it. It's a I'm sure with writing lyrics with you, it's sometimes it's a slow, intense moment process where you're focusing on something, and it's got to be right. That's one kind of an experience, and then it could just go flow, and then it's a focus. So I think the art of writing anything is many experiences, and sometimes it's dense and a pain in the ass, and sometimes it's glorious, and sometimes it's frustrating, and it's all of it.
How frequently do you get? We've heard in the history of songwriting that many songs were written in just a few minutes or an hour, and there's the song, and it becomes a massive worldwide hit. Has that happened for you, where it just comes out of you and there it is? Or does it take you time? Do you have to rewrite and cogitate and spend time giving it some kind of distance?
It's different each time. I did write one song that came very quickly called "It's in Every One of Us." That I was driving in a car, and just like an old MGM musical, I started to sing it. There it was. But generally, I work hard at the small stuff. I sweat the small stuff. I don't sweat the grand sweep of it. I let it alone. I let it happen. I let it take me over. I let it surprise me. I'm always surprised. Not always, but mostly I get surprised by where it's taking me. But when it's done, and I'm through huffing and puffing, going, wow, that was fabulous, then I bring it back, and then I start to chip away.
Do you feel like many creators that it's not really you doing it, that something's coming through you from the universe?
Yeah, sometimes I do.
That you're not actually doing anything other than being a conduit.
You're kind of letting it, and especially with lyrics, and especially for theater lyrics, I'm always surprised as soon as I start to force where it's going to go, it seems to close down on me.
It sounds forced.
It sounds forced, and I get writer's block and all those crazy things people talk about.
Well,
but if I just allow it to lead me, then I find it's more successful. And excuse me, last thing I would say about that, I'd have to be willing to throw it out. I have to be willing to throw it out. So when I'm forcing it, basically I've got this thing that I want it to be. It's got to be that, and it's not working. But now I know enough to know when it's not working, David, it's not working.
So when you were starting out, you didn't know that, did you?
Didn't know what part of it?
So when you were first writing songs, you didn't know, hey, David, that's not working. You just kept forging ahead, like most of us. When you're first starting out, you don't have enough experience to know what is or isn't really working.
Right. Well, true. And what teaches me the lesson is when I'm angst ridden and I want to cry and jump out the window and forget the whole thing, something comes along and taps me on the shoulder and says, wait a minute, try this direction. And I went, oh, no wonder the direction I'm going is wrong. It will be a dead end. I don't know it yet, but it's going to be a dead end. But if I turn it on its side or say something else, then for some magical reason, it flows, and it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it ties up in a bow, and I go,
And not to harp on it, but truthfully, that comes with wisdom and time. That's not something that a first time somebody's sitting down at the piano, they've just learned how to play the piano, and now they're already writing stuff and they know what works and doesn't. Yeah. You're a longtime pro, and you have wisdom and experience of having done it a lot. Don't you agree?
Yeah, well, sure.
You already know many instances this is not going to work. So you immediately eliminate those. That's how I look at writing, that you know this isn't going to work. I know if I go down this road, I'm not going to be happy with it. So I just don't go down that road.
So why waste your time?
Right. But you don't get to that point until you've done it for a while and you've had some experience with things that don't work and those that do. So, oh, this will work. That's how I look at it. I look at it. I've spoken about this many times to students of mine, that it's a little bit like Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire, when you watch him dance, he looks like it's effortless. Like he got there with hardly any work at all. And yet it took hundreds of hours of really working the body to make it look effortless. That's right. Part of the songwriting process too, I assume, for you.
It is, most definitely. It's got to go beginning. It's got to flow. It's got to go somewhere. And where it goes has got to keep my attention and keep my attention and keep my attention and keep my attention. And for any reason, it goes up, it goes slow, it goes faster, it goes harder, it goes softer, but keep my attention and then it pay off, boom. And sometimes gentle and sometimes bang, but it's got to travel. It's a story. And I don't mean like this happened and that happened, but it's got the qualities of a story. It's right. Don't you think?
I totally agree. One of the things that I was going to ask you, which is you're leading to, is song structure. How important is structure to your thinking in a song? How important is it?
Oh, very, very. And the beauty of it, well, I think of, let's see, Richard Rodgers, folks, Richard Rodgers and Hammerstein, Rodgers and Hart.
Sure.
Richard Rodgers is, to me, he's the man, because what he does is he sets up these incredible structures that you just know where it's going, and it doesn't go there. But you wouldn't have harmonically, and you wouldn't have the joy that he intends for you if he didn't have the structure first. When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high and don't feel afraid of the dark. Statement. At the end of the storm, here's a golden sky. And now he's making God for us. But if he didn't have that first little section where you kind of go, oh, that's lovely, I'm going to lean forward now. And he just blows your mind.
So you mentioned earlier that when you're working, you like to continue to feel surprised by what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what makes great storytelling and great songwriting what it is that when you, the artist, know where you're headed, or you'd like to think you are, but the audience is going to be surprised by what it is that you're doing. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, but as you say, the thing with structure, the other thing about it is there's something so delightful about predictability. All of me loves all of you. I mean, it's so predictable, and it's fresh and it's new. I'm not saying it's predictable copy. It's predictable. It's simple. It doesn't intend anything but honest. It's just correct. And why it's correct, God only knows. It just is. So there's structure for you, and pop music is the greatest. I mean, going back as far as the 20s, 30s, 40s and on, the American Songbook and all that, into the rock and roll thing, into the pop thing. It's the song, isn't it? It's something you're supposed to sing.
And it has to have something sweet in the melody. It can't be unharmonious. It has to have a harmony to it. Am I right?
Yeah. Well, it has to have.
I can't think of a pop song that's
pop song.
Yeah, pop melodies. I can't think of one that is not harmonic in some way.
I think that's true. Yeah. I mean, I was looking at Sondheim when you said that, but that's not he. When he writes "Send in the Clowns," that's a pop song.
That's a pop song. There's no question. Pretty Women is a pop song.
It is.
He knew exactly what he was doing, and sometimes he was a little discordant, but most of the time he was writing in something that was challenging and surprising the whole time he was doing it. He was good
Absolutely.
at that. I can tell when you're singing and listening to you sing, and also in the songs that you write, that there's a passion that comes through, that you have passion for what you're doing.
Yes.
How important is passion in the art form that you practice?
In the writing part, or the singing, or both?
Both.
Well, I think it's the only reason. I mean, it's the only reason I can think of. It's got to, it can make you laugh. Doesn't have to make you, feel deep feelings.
Well, passion is all kinds of things. Yes.
Yeah, it's got to do something for you. It's got to have an emotional response.
Do you think that a singer can learn how to find the emotional core of a song, or do you think that a great singer has to have it already, an understanding of it?
I think you mean if a great singer is handed a song?
Yes, and they've never heard it before, and now somebody's going to play it for them for the first time. Can they just find that emotional core because they have it innately?
It could happen, sure. Or they have to find it, like you say.
But you can't be taught it. If you don't know, you don't know how to sing and find the emotional core of a song, can you be taught that?
Gosh, I don't know.
I'll tell you why I asked the question. I stopped sort of watching American Idol a number of years ago, but I watched it for a really long time. Yeah. And the auditions at the beginning, you would frequently see people who they purposely showed you who couldn't hit a note. They couldn't hit a note, but they were passionate and they thought that they were perfect.
And if they were, they weren't feeling it. Right?
That's what I'm saying. So can they? I think the answer is probably obvious, and the answer is probably no. But can you be taught to do that? I don't think so. Do you?
I don't know. I mean, it's I so agree with you, and I talk about it. Well, I sit and watch those shows sometimes with my wife, and I'll go, and they're all, so many of them are just, wailing away and trying to be grand, and it's like, guys, stop, stop. What are you doing? I'm not feeling anything. I'm feeling lots of perfection, and the audience, the voice, and not the voice, Masked Singer and all that, and the audience is going, woohoo, wow. It's like acrobatics, and they just went through a flaming hoop, woohoo, which is fine, which is fine. It's fun, but enough, and everyone, and then sometimes someone will come on and go, la, 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 they get right on the mic, and I go, and everyone goes, wow, they sit forward, right? And but can you teach that? The dynamics, I think, is what you mean. The feel for the dynamics.
Exactly.
I have no idea if you can teach it or not. But
I have a feeling I have a feeling it can't be taught. It has to be something that's innate. It can be developed, but not taught. As in, right. You don't have that. I'm now going to teach you how to do that. I don't think that's possible.
Well, but let's say teaching acting, for example. I mean, I studied acting for a minute. I don't think I was very good, but I was trying to find, like, how does this connect to me? How do these words connect to me? And I didn't, sometimes I'd hit it and I go, oh, and I think maybe similarly with songs, singing songs, you can find the character in you that's real. All it has to be is real. The other thing I think would help singers to know is that you can do it any way you want. This is your rendition. This is your expression. You don't have to sing the song. You can sing the song, and where it's supposed to go really loud, you can pull it back and whisper it, and people will pee their pants. It's fun. It's fun with emotions, what it is. And I think maybe if one could teach that, just go free, break it open, break it apart, turn it upside down, then maybe they'd find that they could do it.
Were you doing that sort of thing early on when you were first at 5, you were learning music and you recognized that this was something for you? Were you already doing that when you would sort of emulate songs that you were hearing?
Well, I did it naturally because that's part of what I loved.
Mm-hmm.
When I heard West Side or any of those things that my parents would play for me, it was the dynamics. This thing is going real soft, and it's romancing me and lulling me, and then it just goes into some just a magnificent swell of emotion, which wouldn't mean anything if it wasn't for the prior soft thing. And it was all of that captivated me. I thought, man, this is the music. That is how you make music. You don't make music. It's like sex. You don't go bang, 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 bang. It's a finesse. It's a communication. It's a feeling, and you're there co-creating it with your partner,
with the audience. You have to have the audience as well.
With the audience, that's absolutely right.
You can't really get anywhere without the audience. That's for sure.
Yeah, you mean you can't get it? Yeah,
you aren't going to have any kind of success. You're not going to. What's the point of doing it? I mean, you can be an artist, I guess, and do that forever and never show it to anybody. But you need that third leg. You need the source, the message, and you need the audience in order for it to be a complete circuit that makes sense.
Sure, it's communication, and I'm sure, as you know,
it's Aristotle is what it is. Yeah,
it's the joy of having it be received. You made that effect on somebody. That's right. Pretty cool.
That is pretty cool, yeah. And you've done that a lot. You've had that effect on a lot of people over a lot of years, and my assumption is that then spurs you on to do more. Yes,
it does. It does.
So, what is your favorite thing about performing in front of an audience?
Well, when it's really happening, we're having a blast. We're having fun. And when I'm really in good voice, I'm enjoying presenting this thing to them, because I know it's having an effect on them, because it's having an effect on me.
Mm-hmm.
Right there. I'm so in it. I'm not worried that they are or aren't, but I'm sure that they are. They'd have to be.
You can feel it.
You can feel it. You bet. You bet. And, back to the American Idol syndrome, where if you don't feel it, then why? You can sell records, but why? What are we doing here?
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you do to, if anything, to develop your voice on a regular basis? Do you practice every day? What do you do?
No, I don't. Before I perform, I train. I mean, I do exercises and stuff, but I just play a lot. I play around a lot. Sometimes I sing in the car. I just use my instrument.
Do you play every day?
No, because it just seems organic to the day. Sometimes I'm in the car. Sometimes I'm at the piano. Sometimes I'm playing a show or rehearsing, but there's always singing somewhere.
You're a singer every day in some way, even if it's just just walking through the house.
Pretty much. Yeah, I'll just come home singing a song, because I like it, or I just heard it on the radio or something.
Do you have a pre-show ritual that you go through?
Yeah, I do. Let's see. Well, first of all, I get into training about several days before I do a show.
Right.
If it's a tour, then I stay in the zone, and it's a diet thing.
Is the training also physical, like working out, that kind of thing?
No, it's a diet thing. I go into a zone where I just have protein and vegetables, no spice, no wheat, no grains.
What happens if you were to have that?
I get a shorter breath a little bit. My lungs kind of swell a little bit. It's like probably an allergy of some kind, So I'm not saying people should do that. I'm just saying that's what I need to do. I eat lots of eggs.
Eggs.
It's in my contract. It is. And people think I'm joking. The promoter will say, yeah, and eggs, hard-boiled eggs. I said, no. So eggs are like little protein pills.
They are.
Before I go on, I pop an egg or two, take a couple of sips of coffee maybe. I make sure that I'm well exercised. I'll do my exercises in the dressing room.
Your vocal exercises.
Yes. And what helps me too is there's this, you've heard of Scientology, obviously.
Sure.
And I love it. I've studied it for many years. And one of the things that I love in Scientology is there's these little, they call them processes or things that you do. And this particular one gets me arrived in present time. Bang. Well, and so I basically look at things and, I look around. Oh, there's a wall and there's a ceiling and I see until I've arrived. And then the last thing I do is I go into the wings and wait to be announced or called on. And I say to myself, why am I here? And I only started to do this because of all the years where I didn't do this. And I walk out on stage without a purpose. Either maybe I was trying to show off in front of girls, or I was trying to be cool, or trying to be a star, or whatever this stupid things I was doing, and it wasn't working, and I get depressed during the show, and I wasn't free, blah blah. And so what I realized was like, why am I here? And the answer always is for them,
for the audience.
It's for them. It's not for me. It's not about me. Don't worry about me. As soon as I start worrying about me, I'm not there. I'm putting on a crappy
show. You know that's parallel to what actors do or taught to do, which is to not focus on themselves, but to focus on the others in the scene.
Perfect. Yeah.
And that way you're taking the onus off of yourself and placing it on what's coming at you to react to it.
Yes.
And so when you go out, you're giving to the audience, and then they're reflecting back to you.
Yeah, exactly. So when I go out there and I say, hi, I'm actually looking at them.
So have you ever been inspired in the middle of performance with a new song? Has that ever hit you? I've got a song idea while you're performing?
Oh, no. But in sound checks and stuff, I'll go, wait a minute, and I'll take out my little handheld, whatever it is.
You have had inspiration that lightning bolt has hit you at certain times.
Yeah,
it might not be overly convenient, but there it is.
Well, sure. Well, in sound checks, always, because the piano is always better than the one I've got at home. And, and it's like, wow, I'm playing on this Bosendorfer Steinway mega hoo-ha, big, 10-foot Yamaha and it sounds
I've never, by the way, seen a mega hoo-ha, but that's
a
okay.
mega hoo-ha. Yes, yes. I used to date many. They were mega hoo-has. But you know what I mean. So it's sometimes I enjoy that so much. Something will come like that. Yeah.
And that probably feels pretty good when that happens. It's like, there it is.
Yeah. What's or at least an idea or something. Music's supposed to be fun.
If it isn't fun, why are you doing it, really?
Right. And it doesn't mean you don't struggle, but it's supposed to be fun. Or writing lyrics, or writing books, or writing screenplays like you do, and all the things that you do. I mean, I'm obviously preaching to the choir here. But basic, when it works, it's worth everything.
I have a sign on my computer in front of me that says, "Enjoy the ride on this roller coaster."
Good.
That's perfect. Because you're going to have highs and you're going to have lows, and you better figure out how to enjoy this, because it's not all going to be perfect all the time. That's
right. Yeah. Sometimes it's really hard. It's really hard. It's not the right word. That's not the right word. That's not the right word. It sounds banal. It's terrible. And then wait a minute, but the right word is blah, sometimes that's 100 hours later.
I was going to say, sometimes you walk away and then it comes in the middle of the night, or while you're cooking a meal, or whatever it is. Exactly. I want to turn our attention to recording and the difference between, you've made plenty of records. What for you are the big differences? Not the obvious ones. The obvious ones are you're in a studio without an audience and you've got a microphone in front of you that's, and headphones on, and it's different than an audience. But what are the big differences between creating music and a song in a recording studio versus performing it live? Is it an emotionally different thing?
Well, yeah, because the music sounds so good. I mean, when I'm singing, it's in my head because I got headphones on.
Right.
But the real perk is in the control room when it's over, and it's cranked up, and those monster speakers, and the bass and the bass drum are doing what they're supposed to do, which is to feel it in your chest and whatever. Anyway, but there's the fun of hearing it so awesomely awesome that makes recording so much fun too.
Is there a challenge that you don't have the feedback of the audience?
Yeah, sometimes. Sure, you bet. I can sometimes sing too rigidly or too seriously, or I'm trying to get it right, and you can hear it in the performance, Whereas sometimes I'll get friends of mine, to sit in the control room, or even in the recording studio, and sit there and watch me so I can sing it to them.
Would you say that, or are there other things that you would say are common mistakes that first timers in the studio make that you had to learn not to make?
I think the studio is something that I'm still learning, even same with songwriting and singing too. But with the studio, I don't feel like I've yet hit a performance on a record that I can create on the stage. Some of my live recordings have something else. It's like something else.
You think it is the audience that's doing that?
Yeah, it's the happening thing. It's the communication thing we talked about. Mm-hmm. It's happening there, and there's no thought. There's no thought. It's just pure whatever it is what it is. And hearing that back, it's something charming and exciting. And sometimes I feel that I can do a little better with that in the studio. That's my own consideration. My records are fine, and I like some of the things that I've recorded. There are some of my recordings that I think are, that's the way to sing that. But it tends to be a little careful.
Well, certainly in the studio, if you make a mistake in the studio, you stop and you go over it again.
That's part of it, isn't it?
Live on stage, you've made the mistake and it's gone. That's it.
Yeah. It was like old Beatle records, Like I saw her standing there. Every time I'm a fan of the Beatles channel. Are you?
I love the Beatles channel.
Me too. Just all the time. And every time I saw her standing there, and John and Paul are singing in unison or harmony the whole song from top to bottom. And she looked at me and I can see, well, since I saw, so it's the lyric change. One is when I saw her standing there, and later on it's since I saw her standing there, because the story changes. And McCartney singing it right, and Lennon messes it up on the second chorus. And he sings when, and McCartney sings since. And when you listen to the record, you hear it. And they kept it in because it's so cool. It's just cool. And interestingly, as a footnote, the last two times they sing the chorus, it's so much fun because you hear Lennon shy away from the when or since word, and McCartney sings the when or the since, and then he comes back in with the rest of the line. Anyway, but that's an example of the fun of the Beatles,
and they had played together at that point for thousands of hours together.
Yeah.
And
true.
they knew one another intimately as to how they would go in a performance. And so once they were very playful in their approach to all of it, where they would do things that were unconventional, and that's what became conventional.
Very playful.
Very playful.
And yet, I'm sure when McCartney overdubbed his bass, which he did in the later recordings, he wasn't kidding around. Like when you hear, Paperback Writer or something that really features the bass, those parts are just orchestral. They're just so well written, and I suspect that he worked at that very hard.
Another self-taught, more or less, musician,
that's right,
who is clearly one of the great musical geniuses of all time.
True.
The stuff just pours out of him. It's amazing how productive he's been over his whole life. I want to talk about musicals for a moment, because we certainly share that passion together. You've written now a number of musicals that have been produced. What is it about musicals that attracts you? Why musicals?
Well, because it's an opportunity to get into to mine the gold of the emotion. There's so much opportunity for emotion, and other kinds of things and comic things, and plays on words, and the joy of inner rhymes and things that maybe in pop music sound a little too academic or something, or can anyway. But in theater, when you hit the right thing, and the rhymes are real rhymes, they're actually perfect rhymes, not just near or close rhymes. There's something about it that makes me feel accomplished, like I really done something well, like a good painting, a good painting.
Well, it's a big chunk. It's not a little. A song is a small chunk in terms of time, but a musical is a really big chunk.
Yes, that's true too. You can tell a scene in an 8-minute song, and reprise the thing in a different key and blah blah blah, and you've just done 10 minutes of story time, of stage time with a song. You can't do that on a record,
right?
Not easily, not unless it's a Jim Steinman, record. But he's a very theatrical exception.
I have a hard time convincing some of my, not colleagues, but friends and certainly students, that songs in musicals are what we can't do with just a play or a screenplay, which is you can't go and expect the audience to know what's in a character's thoughts. But in a musical, you can take a song and express those inner feelings and thoughts out loud in a beautiful way.
Nice. That's nicely said. Yeah.
And so I think that's part of what you're talking about. Do you think of the three legs of a musical, the libretto itself, the book, music, and lyrics, do you think that one is more important than the other?
I don't know. I mean, I'm a fan of the music part because that's more of my tendency. But a good lyric knocks me out.
Well, the old saying is that when an audience loves a show, they walk out talking about the composer, but when they don't like a show, they go out complaining about the book.
That's true. That is unfair. Well, the book writer famously is the most important element. There's no question about it.
There's no question. Without the story, you have a concert, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with a concert.
It's true. I mean, the story, yes, but even the structure of a musical, as you know, is something very different than writing a play. It's its own art form, and it's very hard. I tried it. I always have a hand in the story writing, but I leave it to the others, because I recognize that it's its own art form, and it can be tough. Listening to the book, hearing the book to Fiddler on the Roof, let's say, Joe Stein's book, that didn't even need songs to me, and it has those songs. But as a book, that's very hard to do.
What would you say is the most important thing about song spotting in a musical? We're going to put a song here, but not there.
Oh, it's so important. It's the most important thing. I'm so glad you said that. I never actually thought about that. It is so, so important. You can miss by a million miles by the wrong placement of something, or the wrong, or to think something's important enough to write a song about. And it isn't. You write the songs that carry the thing through. And it's easy to say in retrospect, after you've seen the show, hey, it just really did that. But you get to throw out 20, 30 songs in writing a musical, because that great song doesn't do what it's supposed to do when you listen to the whole thing together, or we listen to that 20 minutes of the show. So, oh my God, I've wasted so much time and so many beautiful, I think, possible songs that are in the trunk now going, let me out. Bang, 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 let me out. Because of that, because I just didn't know.
You have to publish your own fake book of trunk songs.
Yeah. I'm sure you've got a few.
Well, there's one good trunk one from Jekyll. There is.
That didn't make it.
That didn't make it. That's trunk songs. It's got published. It's very interesting to see. When you're working on a musical, you're creating songs for a character that helps to move the story forward.
Yeah.
So it's both internal and external at the same time. It's different from a pop song, which can do that, but pop songs don't have to do that. A song in a musical usually must do that. It must carry the character and move the story forward at the same time in some way. Right. And so do you have any particular technique or trick or thought as to how you look at the story and go, okay, what am I doing here? That's part of the song spotting process, is to say, we don't need dialogue here. We need song here.
Yeah.
So when you go to write the song, you need to figure out how that character is also carrying story forward. Yes?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. Or the emotion has to be said, which is, I guess, in a way, carrying the story forward in a way. The emotion has to be said. My gosh.
Now, you've done something completely unusual in that you actually do a one-man musical, correct?
Yeah, I tried. I've done it.
That's not common. That's fairly unusual. And what would you say were the biggest challenges of it? Was it to have no one to play off of? Or what were the biggest challenges for you in doing a one-man musical? This is Little Tramp, right?
Yes, with Little Tramp about Charlie Chaplin. It was easy for me because it was a function of the backers auditions that I would do. And where I'd sing all the characters, because then the agent says, hello, and then, do all these voices, and I did the women, and so my dad one day said, why don't you just do that? I said, what do you mean? He said, no, just do that. Just skip getting a producer and 12, and 30 actors, and just sit at the piano like that, go on the stage and do that. And
wow.
I did.
Wow.
And I still do. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Would you say it's more fun than doing a typical David Pomeranz concert?
Yeah, way different. But
way different.
It's great fun. It's just great fun. Maybe more fun because I get to act and find my way. And every night is different, and like any play.
Have you thought about taking that into New York?
Yes. Oh, we're working on it, baby.
There's a place for it. I'm telling you, because I actually can't. I'm sure they exist, but I can't think of any one person musical.
Yeah,
that's highly. There's certainly plenty of one man shows,
sure,
but not musicals. That's different. So, what impact does music have on the outcome of a movie? You've written work for movies before. What impact we can already have covered what impact it has in a musical, but what impact does music have in a movie?
Music or songs?
Well, each.
Well, I mean, music, composing, score is something that I don't do, and I don't do it for a reason, because it is something that I respect way too much to dabble in it, because that's what I would do. I would dabble in it. I can do that. I could, but the greats are great, so I just leave it alone. Songwriting, however, is a joy to write for a movie. I've not done a lot of it, but the things that I've done were either songs that had been written that were placed in a film.
Mm-hmm.
It's in Every One of Us was put into Big, right? And like that.
As opposed to a commission where somebody said, we need a song here. Let's hire David to do that.
Well, I've had a few of those, and those are very satisfying. They don't always work. I did one with the great John Barry, the composer,
Great John Barry is right.
Oscar winner, and I did a lyric for King Kong, the Jeff Bridges King Kong in the late 70s.
The Dino De Laurentiis.
Dino De Laurentiis King Kong, right? Jennifer Lang. Oh no, Jessica Lang.
Jessica Lang, yeah.
Awfully cute back then. Wow.
And a really big monkey.
And a big old monkey. Yes. And so John and I wrote a song, and I was trying to think. And I'm the lyric writer. I'm the lyric writer for that. So I'm going, it's King Kong. What the hell is this? What am I gonna write here? What is this? And I hit my head together, and I thought, well, and I pictured, the girl in his hand, in his palm, looking up into his eyes, and wondering, are you in there? Like, are you a being? Are you in there, or are you just this monkey body? So I wrote a lyric called "Are You In There? Are you in there? Can you hear me? Are you someone I should know?" And it was okay. and I don't know how I could have done it better or where I might have done it, because it was meant to be the theme. So it was meant to be over the credits and such. So I did it as well as I could. Trying to think of another assignment that really, really worked. Yeah, there was a television show called Home, and I wrote with Fred Karlin, and I wrote the lyrics to something called it was from a TV movie, and we were nominated for an Emmy for it, and I feel like I nailed it. I was given the scene, and I watched the scene, and I wrote a great lyric for it. And when I watched it play, as you know, when you watch it play and you go, there it is, and it works
because you're capturing the emotion for that scene.
Yeah, or you're supporting it. It's what isn't there that the music then supplies.
Well, that's the interesting thing to me about the difference between plays and movies, is that most plays don't have a score. Sometimes there'll be a little bit of incidental music or something in a play, but in a movie, without that score, the movies don't do very well. They need a score.
That's mostly true. There's a few exceptions to that. I'm a big fan of old movies. Executive Suite, which is written by Ernest Lehman and starring a million characters. No music. 12 Angry Men.
No music.
Not until the last, 3 minutes of the movie or something. Then the music swells, but there's no music. So it's rare, but it works to great effect. I attended a class at UCLA with Jerry Goldsmith, the great movie composer.
Amazing.
And it wasn't a whole class, it was a series. I sat in on one of his classes, and he played a scene from a movie he was scoring called Logan's Run.
Mm-hmm.
And he played it with and without music. That was brilliant. That was so enlightening. And there was this clunky, ridiculous, sorry, the guys, if you're listening, who made that movie, just regular old silly looking scene with music. It just completely worked. And ever since then, I've been so aware. I'm sure you are too, and your viewers or your listeners are aware, when you can take a terrible movie or something that's just talky and it's like got no dynamic, and put the dynamic under it with the music and make it something. That's a beautiful art form. That's really exciting.
The people often point to a movie called The Magnificent Seven, written with the music by Elmer Bernstein, and that there's this famous scene in it where the cowboys are just on their horses and they're just moving across the landscape.
Yeah.
And without the music, it's really dull. There's nothing happening.
They're
They're
just
just
traveling.
cowboys traveling. But the da 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 da, and suddenly it becomes super exciting and really intense. So the score means everything. It's underpinning all of the emotion of that moment.
Oh, it really does.
I want to talk before we wind this show down. I want to talk for just a moment about your podcast, which I think is fascinating. In song sessions, you speak not dissimilarly to this, but differently about how to write songs mostly. And you're doing this with really highly successful songwriters. And do you find it very educational for you in talking to the other songwriters?
Yeah, I do. Well, I start with interviewing people that I'm really curious about, and I'm mostly fans of. So by listening to them, I'm just excited. I feel like I'm a little kid. I'm a puppy. I interviewed Barry Mann, the part of the Man and Wild tradition, who wrote "You Lost That Love and Feeling" on Broadway, and Just Once, and I mean, so many beautiful, incredible hit songs. And they even wrote "We Gotta Get Out of This Place" by the Animals. We gotta get out of this place, and this is the last thing we ever do. And I'm thinking, how does that guy who wrote "Somewhere Out There" write that too?
Exactly.
By the Animals at that time, even.
How does that one person write all those different things?
It's because he's a great musician. Anyway, so the point is that I would get talking with him as a fan. I'm talking with all these people as a fan. How do you do that? Do you realize what you did there? Something like that. And sometimes, mostly they don't. Is that, oh, did you do that on purpose? And they go, no. What are you talking about? I just modulated it, that because, but that's how it's done, right? You don't think about, hey, this is going to be good. You just find it, and go, that's good. So the people so Barry Mann, I got that with Paul Williams, talking about his lyrics. I got that with Alan Bergman, who wrote "The Way We Were," and all the many things. Oh, and the one last thing I would say, I did one with Felix Cavaliere from the Young Rascals.
Right.
I grew up loving the Young Rascals and learning how to play drums to Dino Danelli playing drums and all. And I had to ask him. I said, okay, because he played the organ, the Hammond organ, and made, after Stevie Winwood established Hammond organ with "I'm a Man" and those great Spencer Davis records, Felix Cavaliere was the next one who brought it into popularity on pop records. And Felix played the organ and played the bass part with his feet.
What?
Yeah. Dun, 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 dun. He played with his feet. It's like church organ.
On a bass?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
On the pedals, on those planks down there.
Really?
And I said, how did you come up with that? How did you do that? In my puppy dog fashion. And he said, I listened to Jimmy Smith, who was the great jazz organist, and he would do the whole thing. I guess it came from church. And so stuff like that, I'm just fascinated, and that's why I do the show, because I want to know more.
Well, that's why I do this show, because I want to know more.
There you go.
And I'm hoping listeners get something out of it by hearing what it is that I'm interested in,
There you go. Well, you do such a great job, Stephen.
Oh, thank you.
I really am enjoying this.
You're enjoying it, and I'm probably enjoying it twice as much as you are. So we are gonna wind this thing down a little. I've been speaking to the great David Pomerantz for a little more than an hour at this point, and I'm just curious, in all of your experiences, which are many, can you share with us a story that's either odd, weird, strange, quirky, or maybe just plain funny?
Yeah. Okay. Well, when I was making an album of the Charlie Chaplin thing, it's the Little Tramp show, and we had celebrities doing different parts, and we had Richard Harris doing Old Charlie. This is for the record, just a record, and Mel Brooks played Mack Sennett. We had Lea Salonga, Petula Clark. It was just a wonderful experience. And so we had Mel Brooks come in, and he he was obviously, a tremendous asset to this album. And he was on again and off again, and he didn't want to do. I was in London at the time, and he was in LA. I want to do it, and he was so sweet, but he was busy, And we had him. Finally, we talked him into it, and we got him booked in Los Angeles. And I flew back to Los Angeles, and a day before the recording, he called me and he said, "David, I'm making a movie, and I just can't find the time." And so I go ahead and I try to convince Mel Brooks, Mel, I put on my super duper, if I had a cigar, I'd stick it in my mouth at that point. I said, "Mel, baby, listen, this is going to be great. We've got Richard Harris on board. He's great." And I'm convincing him to show up. And he goes in his beautiful fashion. He says, "All right." He's got that voice. "All right, Pomerantz, we're going to do this." And he shows up. He shows up the next day. And here's the funny part. So we're recording his song. And in the middle of it, I wrote this improvisational thing where he's supposed to direct the girl on the tracks. It's like old time movie making, right?
Right.
And the girl's on the tracks and the locomotive's coming, and he's got to say stuff to her, And so he's writing this stuff. I had already written it, and we're writing together. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm writing with Mel Brooks. and finally we came up with this thing. And of course he just took it and improv, "Hey, come on, get up on that train. The train is coming. What are you doing lying there? What's wrong with you?" And we have what must be an hour of his ad-libs that I'd love to release as an album sometime. And we only used 30 seconds of it. That was a red letter. That was a hilarious red letter day for me in my life. Yeah.
Last question for you today,
Sure.
David. You've already given us a huge amount of advice throughout this whole show, but I'm wondering if you have a single solid piece of advice or a tip that you like to give to people who are starting out in the business, or maybe they're in a little bit and trying to get to that next level.
I'd say, get out of the business. Forget the whole thing. Be an accountant, just like your parents want. Okay? That's it. No. Let's see. You know what? The simplicity, here's a good one, I think, is write a lot. For songwriters, I'm talking about. Write a lot. And if you're a performer, perform a lot. Don't be shy. Bar mitzvahs, weddings, school, on your neighbor's picnic table, for the neighbors, for your parents, what doesn't matter. Do it a lot. And you'll find your way. A lot of audiences, different audiences. It'll all come to you. It'll all fall into place, and that's especially true of writing. It's all the things we were saying before. So that's what I would say. If you're going to do it a lot. Try not to do it as a dilettante. I know it's rough out there. I know you got to make money. I know it's rough to make money, especially now because 100 million streams equals $12, as a writer.
Crazy.
But you just do it a lot and love it and eat it up and spend your life doing it. Even though you have another job, that's okay. But do it for real. That's what I would say.
Well, I would say that that's about as sound a piece of advice as anybody could give. And that's, without doing that, you're not really going to get very far, very fast. So you must do it. I think that's a very solid piece of advice. Sure. David Pomerantz, this has been a fun, terrific hour plus on Storybeat today. And I'm so grateful that you have been here to spend a little time with me and with the audience out there. And I just can't thank you enough.
Well, Steve, thank you very much. I really admire your work, and I admire what you're doing here, and I've had a great time.
And so we've come to the end of today's Story Beat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great Story Beat episodes to you. Storybeat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.